So, hello. Thank you, Lee and Nick from the National Federation of Tenant Management Organisations here, joining me for our very first stakeholder fireside chat. Can you briefly introduce yourselves, please?
My name's Nick Reynolds, chair of the NFTMO. I also chair a local TMO in Birmingham called Roman Way Estate, and a very proud tenant of Birmingham City Council, who are still still my landlord.
And I'm Lee Page. I'm the paid employee, the only one for the National Federation of TMOs.
Brilliant, thank you. So, just a bit of background: we had a chat quite recently, didn't we, where we met together, and you were talking about the importance really of raising awareness of tenant management organisations amongst staff at the Housing Ombudsman, which is why we're here and we're going to record this chat together. So can you just describe in your own words why it is important to you to do that?
Yeah, because I think not just in the Housing Ombudsman, but everywhere, there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what a tenant management organisation is. We as tenants are elected to take on the management of our properties on behalf of the local authority, and I'll cover that later in relation to the right to manage. And it's a great way of getting involved in the housing services, but also in improving the community in which you live. So it's absolutely brilliant. It's not for everybody because it can be very full on, and you're giving up an awful lot of voluntary time. So essentially, what we do as a board of directors, we are the ones with ultimate responsibility, and we're all volunteers, but we pay professional staff to deliver the housing services on our behalf. And again, everything is handled in complete data protection policies. So we don't know if people are being rent arrears and antisocial behaviour and things like that. We employ staff to do that. If we wanted to know that information, we would be those paid employees. We don't want to know that information. So we have a role and responsibility which we take very seriously. I absolutely really do believe in tenant management organisations because of the empowerment that you can get as a tenant. We are very small. I mean, certainly for my local authority, Birmingham City Council has got about 60,000 properties. We only manage 200 properties. So small doesn't necessarily mean worse or better. It means that it's done differently. So our housing services are delivered right on the estate, and all the tenants know, both myself and all the board members, and above all the staff. And I just think it leads to a greater cohesive community, and the professional housing services being delivered locally on the estate. So I don't know if Lee wants to add anything.
There's a couple of points I would add to that, and I think it's important for the Housing Ombudsman Service and others to recognise that TMOs are not landlords. The ownership of the property still resides with the freeholder, which in most cases is a local authority, although there are some housing associations with TMOs. But they're not a traditional contractor either. There's not a bid against a set of specifications. This is a statutory right that secure tenants have. Assured tenants don't have it. But it's a right that they have to set up a tenant management organisation and take over the delivery of services under a formal management agreement. We'll touch on the allowances and the money a bit later, but it's basically they get what the local authority would have spent to deliver the services. So there's no bidding against others. They have an absolute right, and the landlord can't stop it if they meet certain levels in the development.
Oh, brilliant. And that goes quite nicely into my first question then. Please, in a very basic way then, can you describe how a TMO is different to other landlords, housing associations, local authority landlords? If you can just give us a bit more background into that.
For me, pure and simple, but we're a managing agent. We're not the landlord. So my tenure remains with Birmingham City Council, which is why I said at the beginning, I'm a proud tenant of Birmingham City Council. That's what I want to be. We don't want to take ownership of the properties. We just want to manage them. And in my opinion, not just Roman Way Estate, but most TMOs do manage their services and the housing a lot better, and do outperform the local authority. So as I say, we're not the local authority, we're not the landlord, and I certainly wouldn't want to take ownership of my property. I would much prefer being a tenant of Birmingham City Council. I don't know if Lee could expand a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a formal process which is has statutory backing, which is available from the government website. You can download it chapter and verse. But essentially, a group of residents decide that they want to take on the management of the services. They come together, they decide what services they want to take on, and then over a development period, that can be 18 months to 3 years. It does vary. Over that period, they form a company, a legal entity. So it could be a company limited by guarantee, a community interest company, or more commonly, a cooperative or community benefit society, so that they have that protection of limited liability, and they are an entity in which the council can formally sign off on a management agreement. The management agreement is set by government, the last iteration of which was published in 2013. And that gives you, it's a bit like a pick and mix. We want to do repairs, we want to do cleaning, we want to do this, we don't want to do that, and we don't want to do certain other things. So the residents get to choose what they want, and then they are assessed. They have to be assessed as being competent to do so. And that's an independent process run by the community empowerment team within the Ministry of Housing. And as long as they pass that, they can move forward to the final determinant, which is a ballot of all tenants and leaseholders, including joint leaseholders and joint tenants, on the estate or their area of benefit. And if they win that, it's a straightforward, do you want them to manage or not? And as long as they get a majority, then it moves forward, the management agreement will get signed, and they take on the services that they wish to. They do have to meet performance management targets, which are the same for anywhere within the landlord. They can't be more onerous. But often we find, as Nick said, the tenant management organisations outperform their parent landlord, and there's been studies to evidence that. And then the only other thing to say is, formally, every 5 years they have to ballot everyone all over again, so that there's a continuing assurance that the residents still want to keep managing those services. Outside of that, as with any form of contract, if you don't meet the standards that are set, there's a process by which the landlord can terminate the agreement if the TMO is not performing.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about this outperform, situation, and also, this relationship with the partner landlord you mentioned.
Yeah, the partner landlord, and we use the term a little bit loosely because often it's seen as a bit of a us and them situation. There can be some conflict. Professional housing officers can take umbrage that they think their area has been impinged on. Tend to find that more at a senior level. On a day-to-day basis, I think as long as they're aware of what a TMO is about, most housing officers are quite happy with it. And probably Nick will come in on that about the relationship with Birmingham City Council. But yeah, they set the targets, the TMOs have to perform, and they have to meet those targets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and what
so, I'm sorry, but there's no difference at all. We have to complete repairs in the same time as the local authority under the right to repair. Again, we do a tap traditionally, sometimes on our estate certainly, because everybody knows the handy person and the staff. Sometimes a tap repair can be turned around within literally 20 minutes, and that's can be a one-day job. So we have to adhere to all the policies, procedures, and laws that are relevant to the local authority as the landlord. So it's a great way of delivering at a local level. It's just a different way of managing our properties, and in many ways, I'd argue, it's to the advantage of the tenants. And as Lee said, every 5 years the tenants are balloted by an independent company to see if they wish us to continue. But also at an AGM every year, because we are legal companies, an annual resolution to continue is put towards all the members that attend the AGM. So it is that sense of ownership. This is our company, for our estate, for the benefit of every tenant that we manage. So yeah.
And
I think just to come in on that as well, I
Mm.
think it's important to understand that under the rules of each TMO as a company, generally every adult who is living on their estate has the opportunity to become a shareholder in that company or a member of that organisation, which gives them the right to determine how that organisation, how that TMO delivers services ultimately, and be on the board which oversees the performance of staff. And it's also important to notice, and I think a lot of landlords don't quite get this, particularly with the new regulatory regime that we have, that they don't manage the process of how TMOs deliver their services. TMOs have freedom to either directly employ people to deliver repairs, for example, or caretakers, or to contract out to an external company should they so wish. What the landlord sets are the performance targets.
Mm.
How the TMO gets there is for the TMO to decide themselves. Obviously they need to meet the legal requirements for electrical safety or something like that, but they determine how those jobs in repairs or caretaking or cleaning or landscape maintenance, how those jobs are delivered. And it may be different from the local authority, and local authorities often don't grasp that. They expect everything still to be delivered in the same way, hopefully by their own contractors still, and they don't always get the freedom that TMOs are able to enjoy. And that brings local ownership, which Nick's emphasised. They control and they're happier because they're doing it the way they want it to be done.
And can you just talk to me a little about, really selling the whole setup and the structure of it, but sometimes something can go wrong. So can you talk to me a little bit about what that experience might be for the resident under those circumstances?
In relation to a complaint or things like that?
Yeah.
Well, certainly for us on Roman Way, we welcome complaints. Not that we've had any, because it's a form of communication. And it's what we will do is we will liaise with the tenant to see if it's realistic what they're actually complaining about. Because sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. I mean, as I say, we've generally not had any complaints on Roman Way Estate. We are very lucky. What we have had, and you can't see it at the moment, but in the hallway here, we have had a lot of thank you cards because of the services that we've delivered. So what we deliberately do is we ask for those to be put up so that all the staff can see that people do appreciate the work that they're doing. We do have a complaints policy. We adhere to the local authorities policy and also the housing ombudsman policy, because that's what we've got to do, and quite rightly. But as I say, if a complaint was to come in, it would be welcome because it's a form of communication. But I mean, Lee will be able to touch on it a bit more, because we certainly not had any complaints on Roman Way Estate as far as I'm aware. And we would be made aware of it as a board of directors. So I don't know, Lee, could you expand on that?
Absolutely. The way it should happen is that every TMO should have its own complaint policy, which should merge and be part of the overall local authority or the landlord's complaint policy, and should comply with obviously the ombudsman's complaint handling code. Generally, what would happen is that the first stage of resolution of a complaint will be with the TMO if it's for a service they deliver. If it's a retained service by the landlord, then obviously the complaint from start to finish will be handled by the landlord. But if it's a TMO service, then the TMO will be given the opportunity to address that complaint and resolve it. And then if the tenant is unhappy with the outcome, then they would move generally to stage 2 of a complaints process. And this is where the local authority or parent landlord would tend to come in, and they would generally, and I'm talking generically here, handle the complaint at stage 2, and then obviously, if necessary, any referral that went up to the Housing Ombudsman Service. So they would be aware, certainly at stage 2, but they would also be, TMOs would notify the parent landlord of any complaints that they have received in terms of numbers and responses and response times, etc. So that should all feed into the overall landlord monitoring system, which is available then obviously to the regulator or the Housing Ombudsman Service.
Yeah, thank you for just taking us from that point upwards. So just moving the conversation on about TMOs in general being, you know, a smaller part of the sector, and I guess being a smaller part might bring size and money challenges. Can you describe a little bit what the NFTMO has seen about the kind of ways that you keep that performance high, you keep that satisfaction high, even amongst, you know, the cost of living crisis, etc.?
Well, certainly in relation to my own TMO, because when you're going through the right to manage process, as Lee touched on earlier, it's almost like a pick and mix of the services that we handle. So we as a board made a conscious effort not to handle major works, not to handle major antisocial behaviour, not to handle rent collection, and a few other things. Other TMOs do that, but we decided not to because our numbers are fairly small. And when you, on economies of scale, for us not to be able to get into deal with a gas safety issue, the local authority have got their legal team that would be able to do that and to issue the relevant procedures. So we decided to walk before we could run. So it enables us to keep the cost and the financial responsibility a little bit lower, and also being realistic about what we can and can't deliver. So every board meeting, every TMO has a financial update, and we can change budget heads. If certain things are going up slightly and other things are going down, but it's easier for us to manage because obviously the manager will advise us as to, you know, we might need a little bit more money in this budget because we've been facing a lot more damp and mold issues and things like this. So it's easier for us to chop and change slightly in order to deliver the services for ultimately the tenant and ultimately for the advantage of the tenant, but at a local level, as opposed to, you know, sort of like a big massive 60,000 property landlord. So I don't know if Lee wants to add anything on that.
Well, I think there's 2 points I would make. The first reason I think why residents who live in a TMO managed home are generally more satisfied, and there is some evidence to support that claim, is that they actually feel that they own the services that are being delivered. And if I'm being completely honest, I will look at a number of TMOs where they have high levels of satisfaction and think, I'm not altogether convinced that you're delivering a hugely better service than your landlord did. But I think the residents feel that it's theirs. And therefore, because it's theirs, they're happier with it because they're not ringing up a faceless call centre. They know that they're dealing with 1, 2, maybe 3 different people at most within a TMO. They've got a personal relationship, and that works both ways, and it helps that feeling of satisfaction. But I think the other thing, and Nick's alluded to this, is about the freedom to via money between budget heads if you're making a saving in one area, and TMOs often do, because at a very local level, you can identify the waste much easier than you can with a budget which covers 30,000 homes. When you're managing 200, you know exactly where every penny goes. So if you do make savings, then you can put them towards other areas. And we had an event this week in London for our members, and we heard from one of our members about the work that they're doing on their estates, where they are residents have formed groups, they're undertaking gardening and landscape improvement, they're doing local works to improve walkways, stairwells and such like, because that's their priority. Added to that, they obviously do things which many residents organisations do, whether they're TMOs or not, but they do the social elements as well. But they're able to link with other organisations, local charities, food banks. In fact, this particular TMO in Islington is opening their own food bank in conjunction with a local charity. And they have arrangements with local food outlets whereby food otherwise to be binned comes to their estate once a week, and people can just come in and help themselves to a meal. And these are lots of the reasons where you have people, you're freeing them up locally to deliver these enhanced levels of service. And throughout the pandemic, there were so many examples of TMOs who were doing exactly that sort of thing. They know the vulnerable residents within their area because they're their neighbours. And they go out and they help them and they make sure that they get these services. It's that local knowledge that enables them to do that. And the best will in the world, large landlords tend not to have that. It's very difficult for them to be able to deliver things so pinpointed at a local level because they're too big.
Yeah, I'm hearing, communication, trust, empathy, loud and clear from how TMOs, treat residents. So just to sum up then, because we're running out of time, what are kind of key lessons or key takeaways, anything that you want the Housing Ombudsman Service to really learn and understand, particularly if they do come across residents from a TMO to handle their complaint, which sounds like it might be a rare occurrence, but what can they take away from you?
For me personally, basic understanding about our legal standing. We're not the landlord, we are a managing agent. Equally, we are a company or whichever legal structure anybody has taken. So we're not amateurs. We are, as a board member who went through the right to manage process, all the training that I've been through puts me on par with a housing manager. So our knowledge is at that level. It's just that we choose to employ people to do that service for us. So in essence, we as TMOs, the board deals with the strategic part of element of the housing services, and the manager deals with the implementation of all of that. So it's just basically understanding what a tenant management organisation is. As I say again, we're not a landlord, we are a managing agent. And it's not for everybody at the end of the day, but where people do exercise the right to manage, it is so empowering for us as tenants.
Brilliant. Lee, have you got anything to add?
I just sum that up with saying TMOs, they're voluntary, they're not amateur.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much for joining me and giving us a roundup and an insight.
Thank you for the invite, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.